This is Solo in the Shop, episode 23. In this episode, I'm going to discuss strategies for learning any new skill. Let's dive in. Whether you are a hobbyist, weekend warrior, making commissions for friends and family, or already a full-time maker, if you are solo in your shop, this is the show for you. I'm Ronald Lowe's, the host of Solo in the Shop, a woodworking podcast discussing everything from current projects, tools and techniques, decisions around running a small business, and much more. So if you frequently find yourself alone and covered in sawdust, follow my journey and we can be solo in the shop together. As a woodworker, there's always things that I wish I could do better. I've said before that working on the bandsaw has always been a weakness of mine, and I suspect that part of that is just my own lack of knowledge about how to properly tune/adjust my bandsaw. And that's something I can look up, but I just feel like part of it is not having confidence. And that lack of confidence comes from experience, the experience of trying something and having it go horribly wrong, where the blade cuts into the work or drifts way offline or isn't vertical. All of those things make me hesitate to keep trying. But there are other things that I would love to learn, both in the shop, in the business, but also just in life. I've mentioned to my wife, Anne, in the past that at some point I would love to learn to ride a motorcycle. Not because I plan to have a motorcycle, but worst case scenario, in case of zombie apocalypse, I would like stealing a motorcycle to be an option. And right now it's not. I suspect I could probably get on one, get it started, and probably even get it into first gear and start moving. But then things are going to go seriously wrong, both in my shifting, braking, turning, stopping, just generally operating the motorcycle in a safe way. So if the zombies don't get me, a traffic accident definitely will. There is a common misconception that there's a cutoff age for learning new skills. You know, the old expression, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. I've got to believe that that's completely false. My brain seems to work perfectly well at this age, and I suspect that anything that I set my mind to, I could learn. And maybe that's the first part of learning a new skill, is your brain has to believe that learning that new skill is worthwhile and important enough to put in the work to do it. So it might be more challenging for us older folks to pick up something new, but the principles of learning a new skill are universal. And in my way of thinking, the advantage that youth has is not so much their young and elastic minds, but more their unencumbered free time. The amount of time that they can spend working on new skills is very large compared to the average adult who has obligations with work and life and having children and things like that. So time is one consideration. But once you've decided that something's important enough to start working on as a new skill, there's a few things that need to happen to position you for success in that new skill. So the first one is to know exactly what you are trying to accomplish. You need to have a clear goal. And if I were going to write a formal goal, I would write it as a sentence, present tense, I will do this, or I am going to do this. There is no, I want to stop sucking at the bandsaw. It's, I will be confident and master the bandsaw. The next is to have a growth mindset so that your brain, your attitude is all pointed in the direction of success and not getting bogged down with the struggles that you've had before, setting you up to repeat past failures. You want to get your brain right and be thinking, okay, I haven't mastered it yet, but I'm going to. This is going to happen, and I'm going to put the work in to make it happen. The next step in learning a new skill is to decide how you're going to learn. It would be very difficult to learn how to use a tool just by watching YouTube. YouTube or an online manual might give you good advice on safety or on how to turn a machine on or off or to service a machine. But a very passive information flow is not going to help you with a skill. A skill requires doing it. So think active learning. So instead of just reading or listening, there are activities that need to be done that require you to engage in different activities so that you understand what needs to happen, you can feel what needs to happen, and you start doing it. And this forces you to truly process the skill and everything that is fundamental to that skill. It makes sense to use different learning modalities. Whether you are, quote, a visual learner, or you need to learn by doing, or you need to learn by teaching someone else, these are all just different tools that allow you to expose yourself to practice in different ways. A very important strategy would be to learn from someone who already has this skill. And whether that is, I keep going back to the bandsaw, whether it's the bandsaw or whether it's selling or advertising or bookkeeping or some other aspect of your life that you want to improve on, finding a mentor seems invaluable. Obviously, it'd be nice to find a free mentor. I know that in the woodworking community, that's not hard to do. There are so many woodworkers who are very generous with their time and their abilities. And that's not just true of woodworkers. I think the maker community in general. So, I work in wood, and if I need welding, I've got a guy, and he's very generous with his welding instruction. If I need ceramics or glass, there are people I know that I can go to, and they're not going to be like, oh yeah, that'll be $100 an hour. No, they're going to be like, tell me what you need. Let's play with this. And the same is true for design, business advice, sales advice, advertising advice. There are so many people that are great resources that want to help. There are definitely people who do this as a career. They want to get paid for their knowledge. And for those professionals, if it makes sense and it's important enough to you, do that. If someone's making a good living giving advice on how to advertise on Facebook, then that's probably someone who has enough experience to add significant value. So in some cases, it may be worth an actual investment in learning that skill. The next thing to think about for learning a skill is how much practice you're going to give it. I know that over the years, myself and each of my kids got into music, whether it was playing piano, playing guitar, and all three of us, to varying degrees, have gotten away from that only because it requires so much practice. It is, again, an investment in your time. And it goes back to the initial point that I made, that if that skill doesn't have some importance and direct correlation to what you are trying to accomplish, if it isn't important enough, you won't put in the work, and that skill may not get developed. And that's definitely what happened with me with playing piano. I can play around with it. I'm not good, but I enjoy it. I pretty much would only play when no one's home because it's just Not a pleasant thing to listen to, in my opinion, but I like to play around with it. So practice is really important. There's rote learning, which is just memorizing. And for most physical skills, that's not going to do the trick. There is deliberate practice, which is basically goal-directed rehearsal, where you want to accomplish either the skill or part of the skill. The Olympics are going on right now as I'm recording this, and you look at the routines that the athletes are performing in gymnastics or in swimming or pretty much any of the sports. And it's not like they go out there and they say, I'm going to practice the uneven parallel bars, because that's too big. They practice one part of it, whether it's a mount, a dismount, a transition, a hold, recovery. In swimming, it's the dive, the stroke, the turn, acceleration, pacing, breathing. Each of those things get practiced individually and then all come together as the skill. The same is true of the skills that us mere mortals want to develop. They are complex and can be broken down into parts. Practice, direct rehearsal on small parts, and then put it all together. The next thing that I'll mention is that taking a break is very useful for developing a skill. Just pushing yourself to go and go and go and go is not going to get it done. You need time for your brain and your muscles to absorb what you've done, recover, rest, and then revisit. I think there's some subconscious adaptation and adoption that happens during rest, and letting that process just happen behind the scenes and then getting back to it is going to accelerate your mastery rather than just trying to push through and become a virtuoso in one session. The last thing I'll say about developing a skill, especially if it's a skill that's going to take any significant amount of time to develop, is just keeping a record of how it's going. If I go back to my bandsaw practice, it would be useful to have some patterns that I want to be able to navigate on the bandsaw, and I can cut it out right now and then save that. And then in a month, do it again and compare. A month after that, do it again. And that way I can get the reinforcement that I'm improving, that the skill is being developed, and that I'm making progress towards my goal. So that's really what I wanted to talk about today, was just the idea of developing new skills. It's something that has been on my mind, not just in the shop, but around my whole business. I've been listening to a lot of podcasts about lead generation and sales and customer service. And these are areas where I have relied on what I'll call my natural ability, which is just being able to hold a conversation with someone and be pleasant and listen and work with people. But I'm hearing that just using my what I'll call natural abilities would be greatly enhanced if I could intentionally add in some sales skills, some directed thought and routine and messaging. And these are all areas that won't make me sound disingenuous, but will keep conversations going in the direction that I want them to go, and make sure that my message to potential clients is very clear, that, I want to help them if I can. And I want to know what their honest assessment of their needs are, what they envision as an end result, and whether my abilities and my product lines up with that. And that's a very simple message. It's clear to me that that's what I want to say, but I don't really have the words that are memorized, that are natural, that I feel like I need to have in my hip pocket, so that when a conversation starts, I can say, "Hey, I'm glad to hear from you. tell me what your vision is for this project, because I would love to help you if I can. Maybe those are the words, but I need to practice. I need to develop that. So while I'm on the bandsaw, maybe that's what I'll be thinking about, is cut on the line and come up with the perfect line for the next sales conversation. That's what I have for you this week. As always, stay safe in your shop. I look forward to talking to you again soon. If you have questions, comments, or suggestions for future episodes, feel free to reach out to me at SoloInTheShop@gmail.com. Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you got value from it and would like to help the show grow, I'd appreciate a review wherever you listen. Be sure to check the show notes for links to my socials or any extra stuff we discussed today. Until next time, stay safe in your shop, and we'll talk again soon.